Omega just escaped the facility, but Dr. Hemlock also said by the instructions of Palpatine, he has all the resources of the Empire to grab her. So does this mean we're gonna get Vader in Bad Batch hunting after Omega? Well, probably not, because the Emperor told him that secrecy was of the utmost importance, but you never know. Palpatine has sent Vader through wild goose chases before and didn't tell him the entire truth, so fingers crossed we're gonna see. But the Bad Batch just premiered. Season 3 is off to a great start. All 3 episodes were great, but the 3rd episode was something special. We got another Prison Break episode similar to the Andor one, and even back in Season 2, when Dr. Hemlock insisted that his cloning experiments at Mount Tantus were crucial to the Empire's future, we immediately knew that this has something to do with Palpatine's resurrection in episode 9. It honestly seems that way. Both Bad Batch and The Mandalorian are heading towards the conclusion of that question mark. How did Palpatine come back? How did his clone experiments survive? But The Mandalorian only showed us why they're after Grogu. They never went truly in depth and in detail. Well, this episode kinda did, and we're here to explain exactly why is Omega so special, so important, and she is crucial to not only this series, even after all this. Let's start from the beginning. We see that there is a big problem with creating Force-sensitive clones, as we saw with also Moff Gideon. In fact, in this facility in Tantus, they have gone above and beyond, because I saw Sith language being used inside the facility, inside that laboratory where Palpatine was. So it seems like Palpatine is also aiding Dr. Hemlock with Sith alchemy, but we're going to make a special video about that. I don't want to talk a lot more in detail there, but we're going to talk about why Omega needs to run as fast as possible, because she is much more important than we realize. You see, it was made clear that the midichlorians cannot be duplicated, and they must be injected into a clone body for it to work. This is why Dr. Hemlock wants access to the Kaminoan clones, because they are his test subjects and he needs to experiment on them. This is why in Season 2 we see Emery give Crosshair a mysterious injection, but it seems like his body is rejecting it because his hands are shaking all the time. The serum is taking effect and is making him weaker. We also see Crosshair with other clones being extremely docile. So I think this has something to do with them getting injected with midichlorians and their body rejecting it outright. However, it's a different thing with Omega. She is special, because it seems like what the episode told us is that Omega is the key to Palpatine's cloning experiments in the future. And it all comes back to Nala Se and back in the day during the Chancellor Palpatine Republic days, where Kaminoans seem to have been doing something in secret. Nala Se was conducting regular tests on blood samples taken from clones. However, we see that she had secretly been hiding the blood samples of Omega. She destroyed them before they were tested. When the Emperor comes to visit, this is when Emery takes charge, and immediately Nala Se tells Omega to run because she knows beforehand that Omega is such a clone that could accept midichlorian injections. How did Nala Se know this? Well, it seems that back in the day during the Republic days, the Kaminoans successfully created a single clone, Omega, whose body would not reject midichlorians. Omega is no ordinary clone. She has always been considered somewhat of a mutant, although much more different than just the Bad Batch, although the reason has never been fully explained. But it seems that the Kaminoans were secretly trying to create a mutant Force-sensitive clone even before the Dark Times, before the Empire, and perhaps Omega is that result. We thought this is the reason why the Empire, why Dr. Hemlock was interested in Omega, because she was special, because her DNA could possibly reproduce Force-sensitive clones, but Season 3 told us that this wasn't actually the case, because now we realize that it was just to coerce Nala Se into compliance. But the moment this blood test showed how special Omega is, Well, now this changes everything. Hemlock will want to figure out how to reverse engineer Omega. If he can do so, then he can create Force-sensitive clones at last for the Emperor. This would be a huge step for him and in his career. Of course, the ultimate goal of Palpatine being actually to achieve this and to further his goals of ruling forever with his new empire. It goes even deeper because the Emperor, once he learns about Omega, he will definitely want her more than anything else. Because think about it, in theory, the Emperor would be able to have a clone body that doesn't reject midichlorian counts. Therefore, he could make a clone from Omega that could be imbued with a higher midichlorian count and increased artificially, therefore making him even more powerful than his original body. One thing you need to know for sure, though, is that I don't think Omega and Crosshair are actually Force sensitive, especially talking about Omega. Many fans seem to think or are confused that this episode told us Omega is Force sensitive, and I don't think this is the case because there are many episodes that show us Omega is definitely not Force sensitive, but midichlorian count is something totally different, and the ability to accept a midichlorian injection. First of all, in season 2, when they rescue Gungi, in that episode we clearly see that Gungi, a Jedi, can actually connect with the forest around him. However, Omega just cannot. This is of course a clear showing that a Force-sensitive Jedi like Gungi can feel the Force and use it. Omega cannot. From what I can tell, the experiment shows that she's able to retain her midichlorian count, not that she necessarily has a high midichlorian count herself. And what's even more interesting, after the fall of the Empire all those years later, the Imperial remnant in The Mandalorian are going after Grogu's blood. Of course, we're gonna need to see the series through to see if they're actually gonna capture Omega or not. So option A is capture Omega but still need Grogu's blood years after this. Or option B, and I think this is what's gonna happen, I think that Omega together with the Bad Batch are definitely gonna hinder this entire project. I think that Dr. Hemlock in the end will fail completely because of the Bad Batch, and Project Necromancer will be set back years, if not decades. With this failure, this is why we see Moff Gideon going after Grogu all these years later during the Mandalorian timeline. Let's not forget, Bad Batch Season 3 is only a couple of years after Order 66, but what we see in Rise of Skywalker, that actual clone of Palpatine, is more than 40-50 years later, meaning that it took that long to do this experiment. So perhaps the Bad Batch Season 3 will show the partial destruction of Project Necromancer, where Palpatine will need to restart this project completely under a new direction. And it's interesting to see that Omega is much more special than we first realized, because even the Kaminoans, this is why Nala Se was protecting her. She is indeed special, and Season 3 will show it. But we're not just done with this. Click on this video to learn much more